This is Carola DeVille, and you're watching Inkwife TV. My beautiful client Patty had a sunset picture that she wanted turned into a tattoo. She wanted to add a turtle and some dolphins and seagulls to it as well. So that's what I did. Before we get too far into the picture, I would like to show you though how I created the stencil. I used the program Procreate on an iPad, and that has been a great program for me. I don't want to go into it, but Procreate is a great program for animating your work. You see the sunset picture she gave me, and I added in the flowers and the silhouettes that I wanted. Then what you're seeing now with the dots is how I'm making the stencil. I have another layer over the picture, and I'm drawing all those dots. The hard lines, the solid lines show me where I want to tattoo solidly, and the dots show me where I'm just going to go in with some shadow work to give it some shape. There's the first goal for today was to get the gray wash and maybe a little bit of color in, and that is what we succeeded in doing. And here is what the stencil looks like without the picture behind it. Then we transfer that onto the client and work from there. So it is a lot of a coloring book type of effect, or paint by number type of effect, but I don't want to oversimplify it by any means. There is a lot of science that goes into it, and you have to know how to do it to get the effect that you're wanting to get. Skin is very difficult to work on. I began working on the turtle in this tattoo because that is the most detailed part, and I did not want to mess up any of the stencil, so I began there. Part of the turtle got outlined right off the bat, but the turtles have a lot of dark patches on their fins and around their face. I did not want to outline any of those patches because I really wanted to stay with a soft effect on the inside body of the tortoise. So what I'm doing is I have my 5-round liner, and it's turned down really low to around 5 volts, and I call it etch-a-sketching. I feel like I'm doing an etch-a-sketch, just very lightly scratching back and forth, and I can barely feel the needle hitting the skin. So I just want it to barely penetrate. I want it to basically give a gray wash effect, but I like using the small needle for this way because I can get into very tight corners, which would be way more difficult to do if I was using any sort of curved mag. And I only like to use curved mags. I don't use flat mags, so I use my liner to do small detailed shaded pieces. Speaking of mags, I now have my 25 mag on my machine, and I'm washing a little bit of gray wash into the shells on the turtle. So those shells are going to be darker than the rest of the turtle as well, mostly blue and green tones, but I want those shadows in there first to make sure it's got the shape on there. I'm still running my machine probably at around 5 volts. I don't like to run it high at all. There's so many colors in this turtle. I will be going over all of it about 4 or 5 times. So I want to be particularly gentle with the skin, so I can go over it many times. I'm up on the water now, and the water in the sunset will be very brightly colored at the end of the tattoo, but not today. It will not be done today. However, I want the shape of all the water in there, so I went with a very, very light gray wash, turned my machine down a little bit lower to, well, no, I may have, probably still around 5 volts or so, and just very gently went over all of the shapes of the water and the waves, and then up into the clouds. And I'm working on the water right now, coming out of that rolling wave. But my hand was in the way for a lot of the sky work. You will see it in the final shot, but My hand was unfortunately in the way for that part of the video, so you didn't get it shown. I flipped her over after the sky was finished and began lining the flowers on the back of her arm. And then I also finished up the turtle's flipper. I had not darkened in the ocean close to the flowers because I did not want to wipe off their stencil. So I had shaded in a little bit, but very lightly. And now that the flowers were all outlined, I could go back in and color in the dolphins and finish up the shadows that were going into the ocean. Moving back to finish up the turtle's flipper, I used the same technique of using my needle to etch back and forth very, very, very lightly. Did a couple of layers probably for every dark spot on the turtle. You know, you can go over it a couple of times because you're hitting it so very, very lightly. And under my hand, back there, the spots are all put in. I'm once again using my 23 curved mag and adding some shadows into the turtle's body. Once I put a little shading behind that flipper, it starts to stand out real good, and he takes shape a little bit. Then we get his cute little eye filled in, and he'll start to look like he has a little soul. There he is. Finally, it's time to work with some color. In most cases, I will start from a dark color and work into the light, but you know, when you're trying to do a watercolor type of effect in a tattoo, and I was going a little bit with watercolor, especially in how the turtle and the background is going to look, it's nice to start with a light color because then your darker colors will blend in a little bit more easily. I won't want the dark colors to be solidly packed in. Just, you know, have a little essence of darkness washed into those medium and lighter tones. That's all I need them for. So I begin with the light colors in this case. The lines in between all of the little dark patches are going to be light blue and white and green. So it's kind of the opposite of what is often the case where you've got light patches with darkness in between them. This is dark patches with light in between it, and it can be tricky to work with. It kind of messes with your brain the first few times you do it, you know, going, okay, and I can't outline this, but this area all has to be dark. And I finally, you know, figured out just work with each little patch individually, carefully at the beginning of the tattoo, and then you will reserve those negative spaces for your lighter colors later. Back to what I am doing in the tattoo, I am adding some brown for texture on his little chest. I wanted to preserve blue highlights along his bottom edge of his chest, but he still needed those brown tones higher up. There's a lighter shade of brown going in to blend those colors. And then here I've got some oranges, some rusty oranges that I am adding around his face. I really love using orangey browns and blues and greens together. They're really good opposite colors that complement each other very well. The warm and the cool tones work great together. You can see now, I must have skipped over it, I added some green into that fin on the right hand side, so you've got a lovely turquoise to green fade. And I can also see that I added a little bit of green into the shells on his back somewhat. On his other fin, I wanted there to be highlights of orange on one side because it gives a great contrast against the blues and greens on his shell. And then fade the other side. It will fade across a turquoise and down into a light mint green. There, I am going over all the dark patches that I made, but I'm not worried about it. In some areas I want the dark patches to be subtle, and in some areas I want them to stand out more. I think that contrast is a great thing to add in when you possibly can. So I'm not bothered right now that the patches I made on his fins are getting muted, because here I go. I've got a dark gray wash, and I'll go back on the edges of the dark places that I want to stand out, and you can see in the background they're standing out a little bit more. I darkened a few of them up. Here's where I think it starts to look awesome, is when I get to put in white highlights. I like to start off on the eye, because then the eye feels like it just really comes to life when you put the reflective highlights into it. There it goes along the edge of his mouth too. Sea turtles are a lot of fun to do. You can make up a lot of it as you go. There's a few basic rules that I follow, some color schemes that I follow when I work with them. But besides that, there's a lot of things you can do with it to make them fit into any variety of ocean scenes. Here I am putting the highlights onto the fin as well to separate the dark patches on his skin, and a few highlights under his neck too. I probably over highlight things, but I just really, really enjoy it. I kind of get carried away sometimes. But I think for the longevity of a tattoo, you want a lot of contrast, and I feel, in my mind, that it is okay to overemphasize and overexpose things a little bit. Once our turtle was done, I flipped Miss Patty back over to color in the flowers on the back of her arm. They needed to be very bright as well, and as they were sitting against what is going to be a blue ocean and orangey sky, I thought, okay, we need a contrasting color, so we went with purple along the outer edge of the flower, and it will fade into some bright orangey colors on the inside, so the color schemes will stay the same and match, but we'll have that purple to set the flowers, to separate them from the sky and blue and the sky and water background. After I put in the purple around the edges, I used a transition color of coral because I want it to be orange on the inside, and I've tried before to just fade straight from purple to orange, and it makes a really ugly muddy tone in between. But if you take coral, which is a little on the pink and a little on the orange side, coral has enough pink in it that you can fade that purple into it without creating some weird funky tone that's really not appealing. It's too harsh of a transition, and it does a weird effect. After I put the coral in, now I'm ready for my orange, and I put the bright orange in as my third color, and what we're watching now is a golden yellow, which will be used for the inside. The golden yellow isn't super duper bright. It's a little bit like a yellowy flesh tone, but for whatever reason, it does work good. There will be a part 2 of this video probably in about 2 months. So in that time we will get the background colored in, and I will make another video to let you guys watch that. But right now I am very happy with how he has come out. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next week.